Picture a peaceful valley at dawn, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the mist, casting a golden hue over the landscape. The birds begin to sing, and the cool air is filled with the scent of fresh dew on the grass. Suddenly, the tranquility is broken by the thunderous sound of hooves as a large group of men ride through, armed and ready for battle. At the front of this fierce group is David, a leader with fire in his eyes, determined to exact revenge for the insult he has just endured. His men are prepared to leave nothing behind but destruction. But then, in the distance, a lone figure appears, a woman riding swiftly towards them. Her presence is striking, not just because of her beauty, but because of the calm, confident determination that seems to surround her. She is unarmed, and yet, as she approaches, the men begin to slow, sensing that something extraordinary is about to happen. This woman is Abigail, and what she does next will not only save her household, but will also alter the course of history. With nothing but her wisdom and humility, she confronts David, a man driven by rage, and speaks words that not only calm his anger but redirect his actions. Her intervention is not just about stopping a fight. It's a divine appointment that will change her life and David's future. What does this moment teach us about the power of wisdom in the face of conflict? And how can one person, with the right words, shift the course of events even when the odds are against them? As we dive into Abigail's story, we will uncover the lessons hidden within her actions and see how they resonate in our lives today. Abigail is introduced in the Bible as a woman of remarkable wisdom and beauty. Unlike many who are simply defined by their appearance, her intelligence and discernment stand out even more than her physical traits. This unique combination made her a standout figure in the biblical narrative. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her ability to navigate challenging situations with grace that made her a truly exceptional woman. People who knew her recognized that her wisdom was a rare gift, something that set her apart from the many women of her time. Living in a household dominated by her husband, Nabal, Abigail was in a difficult position. Nabal's harsh and foolish nature often put her in challenging situations, but her wisdom allowed her to maintain peace and stability. Even in the face of his reckless behavior, she remained calm and strategic. Abigail understood how to manage people, reading situations carefully and acting with incredible tact. Her life demonstrates the power of wisdom, particularly in moments when others are driven by impulsive emotions. In that time, women were often seen as secondary to men, but Abigail's story shows that wisdom knows no gender. She understood the value of patience and timing, often holding back from reacting emotionally to situations that could have spiraled out of control. It's clear that she wasn't just a passive figure in her marriage. She carried the weight of her husband's foolish decisions, yet she managed to rise above them with clever and calculated responses. Abigail's wisdom wasn't just intellectual, but deeply practical. She knew how to handle difficult people and navigate the complexities of relationships, especially when power dynamics were at play. Her beauty might have opened doors, but it was her intellect and ability to solve problems that made her a true leader in her household. Every move she made was deliberate, carefully considering the consequences of her actions, showing us the importance of thoughtful decision-making. One of the most inspiring aspects of Abigail's character is her ability to remain composed under pressure. Many people would crumble under the weight of a foolish spouse and dangerous circumstances, but Abigail was different. She not only survived her environment, but she also thrived in it, proving that wisdom can elevate someone beyond their circumstances. Her example continues to resonate with those who find themselves in difficult situations today. Abigail's introduction sets the stage for what will become one of the most dramatic moments in her life. As the story unfolds, we begin to see just how critical her wisdom would be in shaping the future, not just for herself, but for an entire nation. And with that, we start to see how Abigail's journey is about to intersect with David's path, leading to a defining moment in both their lives. Nabal, Abigail's husband, is introduced as a man of great wealth but very little wisdom. He is described as harsh and arrogant, a person who lacked discernment and often made poor decisions. Despite having riches, he was known for being difficult and selfish, traits that stood in stark contrast to Abigail's wisdom and grace. His attitude and actions earned him the reputation of being a fool, a title that would soon play a pivotal role in the story. Nabal's inability to see beyond his immediate desires often put those around him in danger, including his own household. Living with Nabal was undoubtedly a challenge for Abigail. His impulsive nature and disregard for others made it difficult to maintain peace, but Abigail's steady wisdom helped her manage the chaos. Nabal's foolishness reached its peak when he insulted David, a decision that could have had catastrophic consequences. He refused to show basic hospitality, a critical social value at the time, and this not only angered David but put his entire household at risk. Nabal's lack of wisdom was about to lead him down a dangerous path. Despite his wealth, Nabal lacked the character that Abigail embodied so effortlessly. He was more concerned with his possessions than the well-being of others, even when his own safety was at risk. This self-centered attitude reflected the deep divide between him and Abigail, who constantly had to clean up the messes caused by his recklessness. Nabal's foolishness wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a threat to everything he had built, including his marriage to Abigail. Nabal's refusal to help David's men was not only an insult but a dangerous oversight. David, at this point in his journey, was a powerful leader with many loyal followers. Nabal's rash decision to dismiss David's request showed how short-sighted he was, not understanding the potential consequences of his actions. His arrogance blinded him from seeing the bigger picture, and this would soon lead to serious repercussions for both him and his household. Nabal's foolishness serves as a stark contrast to Abigail's wisdom. While she sought peace and stability, Nabal's actions only brought chaos and danger. The Bible paints a clear picture of the differences between them, and it becomes apparent that Abigail's intelligence was the only thing keeping their household intact. As the tension between Nabal and David escalates, it's clear that Abigail's intervention will soon be needed to prevent disaster. As we move forward, the tension rises. Nabal's foolishness sets the stage for the conflict, and Abigail is about to take center stage to prevent a catastrophe that could affect not just her household, but the entire region. Her wisdom will soon be put to the test as she faces the consequences of her husband's actions. The conflict begins when David, who had been protecting Nabal's shepherds and livestock, sends messengers to request provisions. David's men had acted honorably, ensuring Nabal's wealth remained untouched by raiders or thieves. However, when the request was made, Nabal responded with arrogance and insult. He dismissed David's goodwill, questioning his identity and undermining the protection he had received. This response was not only disrespectful but dangerous, considering David's position as a leader with an armed force at his disposal. Nabal's disrespect toward David was the spark that ignited the conflict. Instead of recognizing the kindness that David's men had shown, Nabal's words reflected his foolishness. In a time when hospitality was a cultural expectation, especially toward someone who had done you a favor, Nabal's response was particularly egregious. His disregard for the safety and well-being of his own household was evident, as he failed to consider how his words would provoke a man like David, who had the power to retaliate. David's reaction to Nabal's insult was swift. Feeling humiliated and disrespected, he immediately ordered his men to arm themselves for battle. David was prepared to wipe out Nabal and his entire household in retaliation. The conflict was escalating quickly, and Nabal's careless behavior had brought his family and servants into grave danger. His refusal to show even basic decency in this situation revealed the depth of his ignorance and pride. As David's men prepared to march toward Nabal's estate, it became clear that disaster was on the horizon. The situation was teetering on the edge of violence, with Nabal blissfully unaware of the danger he had unleashed. His servants, recognizing the gravity of the situation, knew that Abigail was their only hope. Nabal had put them all at risk, and now it would take a wise intervention to stop the impending bloodshed. Abigail's response to the conflict is where her wisdom truly shines. Realizing that Nabal's foolishness had brought them to the brink of destruction, she took swift action to prevent the disaster. Without informing her husband, she gathered provisions and prepared to meet David in hopes of calming the situation. Abigail understood the gravity of the moment in a way that Nabal could not, and her actions would soon prove to be the key to avoiding catastrophe. As the conflict builds, the tension between Nabal's foolishness and Abigail's wisdom becomes more apparent. While Nabal's actions endangered everyone around him, Abigail's quick thinking would soon provide a solution. The next stage of this story reveals how Abigail's bold intervention turned the tide and spared her household from David's wrath. Abigail knew that time was of the essence. As soon as she heard what Nabal had done, she sprang into action without hesitation. She understood that David was not someone to be trifled with and that her husband's foolishness had endangered their entire household. Abigail's boldness came not from impulsiveness but from a deep understanding of the situation. She gathered an impressive amount of provisions, bread, wine, sheep, and grain, and set out to meet David, hoping to prevent bloodshed. Her approach was calculated and wise. Abigail didn't inform Nabal of her plans, recognizing that his arrogance would likely escalate the situation further. Instead, she made the decision on her own, trusting her instincts to save her people. Abigail's bold intervention highlights not only her wisdom but her courage. Riding out to meet an angry warrior leader with a band of armed men was a dangerous task. Yet she did it without fear, knowing it was the only way to stop the impending violence. As she approached David and his men, Abigail's humility was evident. She dismounted and bowed before him, an act of submission that instantly defused the tension. Abigail's words were filled with grace and tact as she took the blame for Nabal's actions upon herself, even though she had done nothing wrong. She referred to her husband as a fool, explaining that his actions were not reflective of her or her household. Her ability to acknowledge the offense without sounding defensive or accusatory was a masterclass in diplomacy. Abigail's speech to David was not just about diffusing his anger, but also about appealing to his sense of justice and mercy. She reminded him that shedding innocent blood would not be in line with his future kingship, subtly encouraging him to take the higher road. Her words were both wise and persuasive, showing that she understood not only the immediate danger but also the long-term consequences of rash actions. David's response was swift and positive, showing just how effective her intervention had been. Through her boldness, Abigail was able to prevent a tragedy. Her quick thinking, humility, and eloquence saved her household from destruction. In that moment, Abigail's wisdom overshadowed Nabal's foolishness, proving that one person's courage and discernment can change the course of events. David recognized the value of her intervention, not only sparing her people but also seeing the hand of God working through her actions. With the immediate danger averted, Abigail returned to her home, knowing that Nabal would soon face the consequences of his reckless behavior. Her actions had not only saved her household, but had also left a lasting impression on David, who now saw her as more than just a woman married to a fool. The stage was set for a significant shift in Abigail's life, as her encounter with David would soon lead to major changes in her future. As Abigail approached David, the tension of the situation was palpable. David and his men, armed and ready for vengeance, were halted in their tracks by this single, wise woman. The scene was dramatic, an angry warlord being met by a graceful, humble figure who came not with weapons, but with words of peace and offerings of food. It was here, in the face of potential violence, that Abigail's wisdom truly shone through. Her presence alone seemed to shift the atmosphere, calming the men and turning what could have been a massacre into a moment of reflection. Abigail's wisdom was evident in her words. She knew David's heart and spoke to it, reminding him of the bigger picture. She appealed to his sense of destiny, recognizing that God had a great future planned for him. In doing so, she subtly reminded David that this act of violence against Nabal, a fool, would tarnish his reputation. Abigail had the remarkable ability to see beyond the immediate situation, and her words resonated with David, who was caught off guard by her insight. David, a man of battle and war, was not often met with such a response. Abigail's approach was disarming in its humility and grace. She did not plead for mercy out of fear, but instead spoke with wisdom that commanded respect. Abigail's understanding of human nature allowed her to connect with David in a way that few others could. She recognized the potential in him and spoke to that, rather than focusing on the anger that had driven him to seek vengeance. Her wisdom, combined with her humility, created a powerful moment of influence. David's response was immediate and profound. He recognized Abigail's wisdom and acknowledged that she had saved him from making a grave mistake. In that moment, he praised God for sending her, realizing that her intervention had kept him from shedding innocent blood. Abigail's actions not only spared her household, but also protected David's conscience, ensuring that he would not carry the weight of unnecessary violence. It was clear that her wisdom had not only saved lives, but had also left a lasting impact on David. Abigail's encounter with David stands as a testament to the power of wisdom in action. Her ability to remain calm and composed in the face of danger, combined with her strategic thinking, had completely shifted the course of events. She had not only prevented a tragedy, but had also forged a connection with David, one that would change the direction of her life. This encounter marked a turning point, where Abigail's wisdom would be remembered long after the moment had passed. The meeting between Abigail and David was more than just a simple act of mediation. It was a profound moment where wisdom triumphed over violence, and grace overcame wrath. The story was far from over, and the consequences of this encounter would continue to ripple through the lives of everyone involved, leading to unexpected outcomes for both Abigail and David. David's response to Abigail's wisdom was one of deep gratitude and respect. After hearing her speak, he immediately recognized that her intervention had saved him from committing a grievous sin. David, a man known for his strength and battle prowess, was also a man after God's heart, and Abigail's words touched that spiritual core. He acknowledged that it was God who had sent her to prevent him from acting out of anger and revenge. Her wisdom had brought clarity to a moment clouded by rage, and David could see the bigger picture again. David praised Abigail for her discernment, and in that moment, she gained not only his respect but also his admiration. It wasn't often that someone, especially a woman, would speak with such boldness and be received with honor, but David saw the hand of God in her actions. He thanked her for keeping him from bloodshed and for reminding him of the kind of man he was destined to be. Abigail's ability to speak to his higher nature, rather than his immediate emotions, had a profound impact on David. This interaction also revealed a softer side of David, one that was willing to listen and be corrected. It's not easy for a leader, especially one in a position of power, to acknowledge when they are wrong or to change course so quickly. But David's heart was open to wisdom, and he valued Abigail's insights. In many ways, this moment foreshadowed the kind of king David would become, one who sought after God's will and was willing to accept correction when needed. David's respect for Abigail was evident not only in his words but also in his actions. He accepted her gifts and assured her that no harm would come to her household. Abigail had not only protected her people from destruction but had also saved David from making a decision that would have haunted him. Her wisdom had brought peace where there was once a threat of violence, and David left the encounter with a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. Through this interaction, David learned an important lesson about the power of wisdom and the value of humility. Abigail's ability to act quickly, speak wisely, and humbly take responsibility for a situation she didn't cause showed David the importance of listening to others, even when anger might cloud his judgment. Her actions served as a reminder that sometimes the wisest course of action is the one that leads to peace, not war. David's response to Abigail's wisdom was not just a one-time event. It left a lasting impression on him, and her name would be remembered as one who spoke truth in a moment of crisis. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that this encounter between Abigail and David would not be their last. There was still more to come in their intertwined destinies. While Abigail had successfully prevented the destruction of her household, Nabal remained blissfully unaware of the danger he had narrowly escaped. Upon returning home, Abigail found him in the midst of a lavish feast, drunk and completely oblivious to the peril his actions had brought upon them all. Nabal's lack of awareness was a stark contrast to Abigail's wisdom and quick thinking. Even as disaster loomed over his household, he indulged himself without a second thought. This moment revealed just how deeply rooted his foolishness was. Abigail wisely chose to wait until Nabal was sober to tell him what had happened. The next morning, she recounted how close he had come to losing everything, explaining how her intervention had saved his life and their household. Upon hearing this, Nabal's heart failed him, and he became like a stone. The Bible describes this as a moment where his foolishness caught up with him, and God's judgment was swift. Within 10 days, Nabal died, a consequence of both his actions and his character. Nabal's death serves as a sobering reminder of the consequences of pride and foolishness. His wealth and status could not save him from the judgment that followed his reckless behavior. In contrast to Abigail, who used her wisdom to bring life and peace, Nabal's arrogance led to his downfall. His story illustrates that while one can accumulate riches, it is wisdom and humility that ultimately lead to preservation. Nabal's demise was the culmination of a life lived without regard for others, and it stands as a warning for those who act without thought or care. The contrast between Nabal and Abigail becomes even more evident in his final moments. While Abigail's wisdom brought her honor and respect, Nabal's foolishness brought him only death and ruin. His inability to recognize the danger of his actions showed a complete lack of discernment, something that Abigail had in abundance. It was as though Nabal's life had been on a path of self-destruction, and the moment David entered the story, it only accelerated the inevitable. As Nabal's life ended, the consequences of his actions reverberated beyond just his own death. Abigail, now freed from her marriage to him, was in a position to step into a new chapter of her life. Nabal's foolishness had cost him everything, while Abigail's wisdom had saved her and positioned her for something greater. This moment marked a turning point, not only for Abigail but for David as well, as their futures were about to become even more intertwined. With Nabal's death, the story takes a new turn. Abigail, who had been bound by her husband's foolishness, was now free to move forward. Her actions had not only saved her household but also set the stage for a new chapter in her life, one that would be shaped by the choices she made in the face of danger and uncertainty. After Nabal's death, David wasted no time in recognizing the incredible woman who had saved both him and her household from a disastrous conflict. Knowing her wisdom, grace, and beauty, David sent a proposal of marriage to Abigail. This offer was not just a result of admiration for her actions, but a recognition of her value as a partner who could provide counsel and support in the tumultuous life he led. Abigail accepted David's proposal, and in doing so, began a new chapter in her life, leaving behind the shadow of her foolish husband, Nabal. Abigail's decision to marry David was a pivotal moment. It marked a shift from a life bound by the folly of her previous husband to a future filled with potential. David was a rising leader, destined to become king, and Abigail's role in his life would be one of great influence and significance. In marrying David, she was not only entering a royal household but aligning herself with a man after God's own heart. Her future was now tied to Israel's destiny, and her wisdom would continue to play a key role in David's life. Abigail's marriage to David was a union based on mutual respect. Unlike her previous relationship with Nabal, where she had to constantly navigate his foolishness, David valued Abigail's insight and wisdom. He knew that her counsel would be invaluable, especially as he faced the challenges of leadership and kingship. Abigail's role in David's life would go beyond that of a typical wife. She would become an integral part of his household, helping to shape the decisions that would influence the future of Israel. Through this new marriage, Abigail was able to leave behind the difficulties of her past. Her life with Nabal had been filled with tension and conflict, but now she was free to use her wisdom in a place where it was appreciated. The respect David showed her reflected the way God honored her for her actions. Abigail's transition from Nabal's household to David's symbolized the rewards of living a life of wisdom, patience, and discernment. Her faithfulness in the face of adversity had led her to a place of honor. This new chapter in Abigail's life also highlights God's providence. Even in the midst of Nabal's foolishness and the potential for destruction, God had a plan for Abigail that was far greater than she could have imagined. Her marriage to David was not only a personal blessing but a strategic move in God's plan for the nation of Israel. Abigail's wisdom had preserved her household, and now it would serve to guide David, a man destined to lead a nation. As Abigail stepped into her new role as David's wife, the story of her life took on a new dimension. Her journey, marked by wisdom, grace, and courage, was far from over. Now, she would stand beside David as he rose to kingship, her influence shaping the future of Israel. And so, Abigail's story continues, a testament to the power of wisdom and the blessings that come when one follows the path of God. Abigail's story is more than just an account of a wise woman preventing disaster. It's a powerful reminder of how wisdom, humility, and faith can completely change the course of our lives. As you reflect on her actions, what would you have done in her place? Would you have had the courage to step into such a dangerous situation, knowing that your life and the lives of those you love depended on your words? Abigail's boldness teaches us that sometimes the right action requires stepping out of our comfort zone, trusting that God will guide us through even the most difficult circumstances. Now, think about your own life. Are there situations where you've held back from speaking truth or acting boldly because of fear? How can Abigail's example encourage you to trust in the wisdom that God provides and act with confidence in challenging situations? God calls us to be instruments of peace, wisdom, and discernment, even when the odds seem stacked against us. Before we close, I invite you to take action. Apply the lessons of Abigail to your own life. Ask yourself, where can I bring peace instead of conflict? Where can I speak wisdom into a difficult situation? If you're ready to embrace this kind of wisdom and courage, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications so you don't miss more stories like this that can transform the way you see the world and your role in it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the example of Abigail, for her courage, wisdom, and faith. Help us to embody these traits in our own lives, to speak with grace and act with boldness when we are called to bring peace and wisdom into difficult situations. Guide us, Lord, and help us to trust you in all things, knowing that you are with us always. In Jesus' name, amen.